Most people still don't realize just how big the intersection between artificial intelligence and blockchain could actually become, and if what many industry leaders are saying right now ends up playing out over the next few years, the amount of transactions happening on blockchain networks could increase by an absolutely massive amount. Because right now, when we think about financial transactions, we usually think about people, humans sending money, humans paying bills, humans making purchases online. But the reality is that the next wave of the digital economy may not be powered by humans at all. It may be powered by AI agents. Now, if you're not familiar with what AI agents are, think of them as autonomous systems that can operate independently. They can execute tasks, make decisions, interact with other software systems, and in many cases even manage financial operations without constant human input. And that's where things start to get really interesting, because once AI agents become more widely adopted, they're not going to operate like humans do today. They won't be logging in once a day to check something or making a few payments every week. These systems can run continuously, 24 hours a day, making decisions and executing transactions at a scale that humans simply can't match. We're talking about potentially millions of automated transactions happening every single day, and eventually billions. And that's where blockchain infrastructure becomes incredibly important. Because if AI agents are going to interact with each other, pay for services, move value across networks, and operate within digital marketplaces, they're going to need some type of payment rail that actually allows those transactions to happen instantly and at extremely low cost. Traditional financial systems simply weren't built for that type of activity. Banks are slow. Credit card networks have relatively high fees, and legacy payment rails were designed around human activity, not machine-to-machine transactions happening constantly across the internet. This is why many developers have been looking toward blockchain networks as the infrastructure layer for this next phase of the digital economy. Blockchains allow automated systems to send value programmatically. They operate 24/7, and they can settle transactions in seconds rather than days. But even within the blockchain space, not every network is optimized for this type of activity. Some blockchains have extremely high transaction fees, others struggle with scalability. And when you start thinking about a future where AI agents could be making millions of payments every hour, those limitations become a serious problem. This is exactly why certain networks that focus on speed, efficiency, and extremely low transaction costs are starting to get a lot of attention from developers building these kinds of systems. And one of the networks that keeps coming up in these conversations is the XRP ledger. Because when you look at what the XRP ledger was originally designed to do, fast transactions, extremely low fees, and instant settlement, it actually fits very well with the kind of infrastructure that AI-driven economies might require. And in the next part, we're going to look at why some experts believe AI agents could eventually become one of the biggest users of blockchain networks like XRP. Now take a look at this, because this is where the conversation around AI agents starts to get really interesting. One of the things that a lot of developers have been talking about recently is how automated systems are going to interact with financial markets, because once AI agents start operating independently, they're not going to behave like human traders. Humans trade occasionally. AI agents can trade constantly, and that's a very important difference. Think about automated trading for a second. If an AI system is managing a portfolio, it can analyze data, rebalance positions, and execute trades continuously throughout the day. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't need to sleep, and it can react to market changes instantly. Now imagine millions of these agents operating at the same time, every single one of them making decisions, every single one of them executing transactions. That alone could create an enormous amount of financial activity across digital networks. But here's where infrastructure becomes extremely important, because if those agents are making transactions constantly, the cost of each transaction matters a lot. If the network they're using charges high fees, those fees start adding up very quickly, and suddenly the system becomes inefficient. This is exactly why developers building these kinds of automated systems tend to look for networks that are fast, efficient, and extremely low cost. And this is where the XRP ledger starts entering the conversation, because one of the biggest advantages of the XRP ledger has always been its ability to process transactions very quickly while keeping fees extremely low. We're talking about transactions that settle in just a few seconds, and the cost of those transactions is incredibly small. For humans making a few payments per week, that might not seem like a big deal, but when you start thinking about AI agents executing thousands or even millions of transactions, those efficiencies become incredibly important. This is why some developers have been pointing out that networks like the XRP ledger could actually be very well suited for machine-to-machine economies, and we're already starting to see conversations about this happening across the industry. Now, here's another interesting point. AI agents can't open bank accounts. They can't apply for credit cards. They can't use traditional financial systems the same way humans do, but they can interact with digital assets. They can hold crypto. They can send crypto and they can use blockchain networks to move value across the internet. So when you start thinking about a future where AI agents are booking services, paying for data, interacting with digital marketplaces, or even coordinating with other agents, the payment infrastructure behind those transactions becomes incredibly important. And this is exactly why some analysts believe the combination of AI and blockchain could create an entirely new layer of the digital economy. Now, in the next part, we're going to look at something that a lot of investors are starting to pay attention to. Because if AI agents really do start using blockchain networks at scale, it could mean that the value of those networks increases dramatically over time. Now, here's where this entire conversation becomes very interesting from an investor perspective. Because when people hear about AI agents and automated systems, the first thing they usually think about is technology companies. They think about software platforms, AI tools, or large tech corporations building these systems. But there's another layer to this that many people overlook, and that's the infrastructure layer. Because if AI agents are going to be operating across the internet, sending payments, executing transactions, and interacting with digital marketplaces, they're going to need a financial system that allows all of that activity to happen. And this is exactly where blockchain networks come in. Now think about how the internet evolved for a moment. When the internet first started growing, most people didn't invest in the infrastructure behind it. They focused on websites, applications, and companies building on top of the network. But over time, the real value ended up being created at the infrastructure level. The networks themselves became incredibly valuable as more users joined and more activity happened across them. And some analysts believe we could see something very similar happen with blockchain networks. Because if billions of AI agents eventually begin operating online, they're going to need rails to move value across the digital economy. They're going to need payment systems. They're going to need settlement layers. They're going to need infrastructure that allows them to transact with each other instantly. Now, here's the interesting part. Unlike the early internet, blockchain networks actually allow individuals to own part of that infrastructure. And that's what the tokens represent. When someone holds a digital asset like XRP, they're essentially holding a piece of the network that processes transactions. So if the usage of that network increases, the value of the ecosystem around it can increase as well. And this is exactly why some investors have started paying very close attention to how emerging technologies like artificial intelligence could interact with blockchain systems. Because if AI agents end up making millions or even billions of transactions every day, those transactions have to happen somewhere. They need rails, they need infrastructure, and the networks that support those transactions could see enormous growth in activity. Now, of course, no one knows exactly how this will play out. The technology is still evolving, developers are still experimenting with different systems and different architectures, but one thing that many industry leaders seem to agree on is that automated systems are going to become a much larger part of the global economy. And if that happens, the digital payment infrastructure behind those systems could become incredibly important, which is why so many people in the crypto space are watching very closely to see how blockchain networks position themselves for this next phase of technological innovation. Because if even a small percentage of these AI-driven transactions start happening on networks like the XRP ledger, it could have a significant impact on overall network activity. And that's something investors are definitely paying attention to. All right, let's wrap this up because this is really where the picture starts to come together. The reality is we're at the very beginning of what some people are calling the agentic economy. And if you haven't heard that term before, it's basically the idea that AI agents, autonomous systems, will start taking over a lot of the financial activity that humans do today. From small payments to managing massive treasury operations, AI agents will be doing it all. Now, here's the part that most people don't realize. AI agents can't open bank accounts. They can't get credit cards. They can't go through traditional financial systems, but they can interact with digital assets. They can use cryptocurrencies to move value instantly, and that's why networks like the XRP ledger become so critical. Think about it. If billions of AI agents start using crypto to transact, even a small portion of that activity happening on the XRP ledger could dramatically increase transaction volume. More volume means more activity, and more activity could drive the overall value of the network higher. And here's the clever part: you don't even have to do anything. Just holding the token allows you to participate in the growth of this emerging ecosystem. Now, we're already seeing signals in the industry that this is starting to happen. Leaders from Ripple, Circle, and other major players have openly discussed the potential for AI-driven financial systems. They're investing, building partnerships, and designing the infrastructure needed for AI agents to operate at scale. And this isn't just hype, these are concrete steps being taken right now. One executive at Ripple even said, AI agents will become the biggest users of crypto over the next several years. And the numbers they're projecting are staggering. Millions of transactions per hour, billions of automated payments per year. The scale is unlike anything humans can handle, and if XRP is one of the rails these agents use, it could benefit significantly. Here's another key point. This isn't a distant concept. This is already being built. Conferences, presentations, pilot projects, these systems are actively being tested and improved. And if you look at what's happening in the DeFi space, institutional adoption, and cross-border payment solutions, the foundations are already being laid for this AI-driven financial ecosystem. So, what does this mean for investors like you? Well, it's simple. The more AI agents rely on networks like XRP to transact, the more integral these networks become to the global digital economy. And as that importance grows, so does the potential value of the tokens themselves. Holding XRP could allow you to passively participate in the growth of a technology-driven economy without ever executing a single transaction yourself. And that's exactly the exciting part. We're seeing the early signals, the infrastructure being built, and the partnerships forming. If this trend continues, AI agents could truly transform how value moves across the digital world, and XRP could be at the center of it all. So, keep your eyes on the space, watch the developments, look at the partnerships, the pilots, and the emerging use cases. And remember, this isn't just speculation. The foundation is being laid right now, and those who position themselves early could be the ones who benefit the most. All right, that's it for today. If you got value from this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss updates on AI, crypto, and XRP because this is going to be one of the most exciting shifts in the digital economy we've ever seen.